it was an old run-down pub building, and it was disgusting. It was in the capital city of Zambia called Lusaka, and I was 22 years old at the time, and here I was standing there, and facing me, standing right in front of me, was this little girl. And she was about the size of a 7-year-old, but she was 10 years old, and her body was so frail. She was bending over, she couldn't even stand up straight, her cheeks were gaunt. And as I was standing amongst this disgusting, decrepit building that you wouldn't even want your dog to live in, and it was a school for these children in the largest compound, the largest slums in Lusaka. And I stood there and I just remember thinking, I don't want to be here. This isn't what I came here for. And as this girl leant forward and hugged me, in that very moment, I knew that God's purpose for my life was far greater than anything I could ever have imagined. And that was because when I originally went over to Zambia, when I was 22, I went to work in a small little orphanage in a beautiful rural area with 12 children who were relatively healthy, and I was staying in a house that was built by Fly and Build team, and it was a really nice environment, and that's what I thought I was going there to do. But a week and a half into it, malaria broke out in the region. It was really bad and dangerous, and they were scared that I could get it and die, so they told me to move down to the capital city. So here I was, I had 9 weeks left of volunteering, and no one volunteered. And I was on my own. There was a American family that took me under their wing, and I was thinking, God, why did you bring me here? My life savings, everything, just to have this happen. And I went to project after project in the city, and it wasn't until that very moment that I met this girl that I knew that's what God wanted me to do. And she was dying of AIDS, and in the time I was there, she did die of AIDS. She was born HIV positive, and because of the poverty there, they couldn't get her on antiretroviral drugs in time. And here I was, and I spent the next 9 weeks teaching over 500 kids in this school. There was about 45 in my classroom, and the building, the classroom size was probably about as big as maybe from here over to the stand, and maybe the size of this stage, with 40 children sitting on the floor, no resources, nothing. And I just knew that God wanted me to help transform this community. But little did I know how much would transform my life in the process. Because, you see, when we actually say to God, work through me, when we actually have justice at the heart of who we are, it's amazing what God can do in your life. And in Amos 5, in the Old Testament, the children of Israel, they have got everything. And they're worshipping God, they're coming to church, they're doing everything, I guess, that God has told them to do. Yet God is angry with them. And in Amos 5:21, he says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. God didn't even want to hear their music. He didn't even want their money, their offerings. He said, I will not even listen to the music of your harps. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. God was angry because, you see, if all we do week in, week out is come to church, give our offerings, sing 3 songs, listen to a sermon, pat yourselves on the back saying you've done your Christian duty, go home and live your lives. God says, you know what? I don't even want that. Because where's your justice? Where's your heart? Where's my justice flowing through you? And God was so upset because they didn't have his character, because justice is a central form of who God is at their own heart. And so when we exit these doors of worship, this sermon is as much a challenge to me as it is to you on how much is justice a central part of who we are. How much do we allow that part of God to actually imprint in our hearts, in our lives? Because you see, God is love. The very core of who God is actually love. And God loves you. Worship, justice, compassion, and love are all the same thing. They're all one thing. You can't have love and not have justice. You can't have compassion and not have justice. It's such an important characteristic of who God is. And we shouldn't want justice out of fear or guilt or shame, which can often happen. Sometimes we feel guilty about what we have, so we think, okay, well, I'll just give this. But God says, no, I don't want you to give out of guilt or shame. I want you to, or fear. I want you to give because it's part of your heart, because it's part of my heart. And if we have a look at Micah 6:8, I'm sure everybody has heard that Bible verse before, and it says, and what does the Lord require of us to do? To seek justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. The Bible doesn't say, what does the Lord, maybe want us to do? It says it's a requirement, and it says to seek justice. Not to sometimes maybe think about it. It doesn't say to think about it. It says to seek it. And it's the very thing, it's the very first thing that the Lord requires us to do. Yet somehow we've managed to take that away from who God is in the process. And we often will put restrictions on who we will show justice to, based on someone's religion, their sexual orientation, their race, their skin colour, their socioeconomic status. We'll say, well, I'll show this person justice because I understand them, or because I can relate, but I won't show this person because I don't understand them. And like that video said, when we actually get to know people and get to see them, it's very hard not to show them justice in the process. Because compassion and justice, as I said, they reflect God's character, and that's why it matters. It's definitely not trendy, it's definitely not glamorous. It can be really, really hard. It can be exhausting. It can be downright something that you don't want to do, that I don't want to do either. But we do it because it's part of who God is. And I want to ask you to this day, have you noticed, and this is to myself included, that often we are more in love with the idea of justice and compassion than what we are with actually acting on it. We are more in love with justice and compassion until there is actually a personal cost to us. The minute we can feel it, we don't want to do it. Whether that is financially, whether that is with our own physical body, with acts, or whether that's pain in our heart, the minute there's a personal cost, we don't want to do it. And it makes me wonder, are we more in love with the idea of actually changing the world than really changing the world? You see, there's something about me, and that is that I love cooking. Actually, those who know me, my sister, I don't love cooking. Okay, but I love the idea of cooking. And so I have a Thermomix, so it's ridiculous. I don't even know how much money, it's like a mortgage to buy one. I have cookbooks that I buy. I go on Pinterest and look at recipes. I'll chat to friends about different healthy recipes that we've found. And, I can talk about food all day, and I love eating food. And I will, go out of my way to even go to whole food places to buy all this food that to make this recipe that I found, to then when I get home, procrastinate, find other things to do that I enjoy more, then I look at the time and go, oh, it's getting a bit late to cook that now. So then I just whip up something that's just edible and half healthy and eat that. Because you see, I'm actually more in love with the idea of cooking and talking about it than what I am with actually doing it. And how often do we do that with justice? How often do we post things on social media about it? How often do we talk about it? How often do we say, what we see going on, it's so wrong. I have a heart for the poor, or whatever it may be. Yet when it comes to actually taking action, we don't take that step. We find every excuse in the book to not do it. But we love the idea of it, right? And that's what I find is really challenging as Christians. How much do we love the idea of justice, but not actually doing it? often people will say to me, well, Megan, this is all well and good, but what can one person do? You know, I've got a family, and I've actually had a few people say to me before, oh, I'm not going to support the work you do because once you have children, you will no longer be passionate about it, you no longer do it. And this is obviously before I had kids. And I got really upset. Well, I can assure you, and I'll tell you a bit later, this is my story, and it's not the case at all, because it's at the heart of who I am, and it's the heart of who God is. And I can't say I'm a Christian without having God's heart. And I believe that this is such an important part of Him, that it's easy to get overwhelmed because there is a lot of pain in this world. I felt a bit overwhelmed with Syria lately. I don't know if you guys have seen what's going on with hospitals being blown up and little babies in incubators having to be taken out, and in some regions there are no more hospitals. And you know, sometimes it can really get to me and I can feel extremely overwhelmed. Am I the only one here, or are you guys sometimes overwhelmed with what's going on and you think, well, what can I do? You know, how can I help? And I've asked that question so many times myself. But you see, we don't actually necessarily need to go overseas and do that. We don't need to go and change the world out there, because our calling isn't just to change the entire world. Our calling is to be faithful to the gospel, to God and how God is stirring in our hearts, to follow through with what has been placed in our hearts, rather than thinking, what can one person do? We should actually be asking, what can the one true God do through one person? And I want to share with you my story. 7 years ago, my husband and I decided to take a year off, and we spent 5.5 months living outside a leper colony in India, and then we went to Zimbabwe, and I worked for 3 months with kids that lived on the streets. And I was here sitting on this concrete floor with about 8 bodies sleeping all around me. And there was a little boy, and he was in my arms. And he was crying, and I was crying. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. His name's Brian. And as he was looking up to me with his big brown eyes and beautiful long eyelashes, he was telling me his life story. From the age of 7 to the age of 11, he lived on the streets in Harare. And he had to make the decision as a 7-year-old boy, do I stay at home with my mum, who was a prostitute that had multiple men come in that would physically abuse him, where he would get chained up outside to a pole for 24 hours and not fed or given any water, and be kicked and beaten like a dog at the age of 6. This happened to him. Do I risk dying at the hands of my mother and these men? Or do I take a risk and do I leave and live on the streets and hope and pray for a better life? So a 7-year-old child had to make that decision, and he made the decision to run away. And on the streets, I won't go into detail as to what happened because of children in the room, but the worst things that can happen to a child happened multiple times, over and over again, as he was trying to seek safety on the streets. And he started to lose hair from malnutrition. He would catch a bus or a train from Harare to Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. That was about a 7-hour journey overnight, so he could sleep. So he would sneak on till he got caught. Then he stayed in Bulawayo. That's where I met him. He found solace amongst the prostitutes there who looked after him at night, looked out for him when they were on the streets, eating out of garbage bins, and that was his life till he was 11 years old. And when I met him, he'd been housed for about 4 months, so he'd only just got off the streets when I met him. And as he was sharing this with me, he looked up to me and he said, "Where is God through all of this?" I don't know what you would have said in response to that question, but I had no words. How could I answer such a question? But all I could say was, I don't know the answer to that, but God is here now, in me, with you. God has brought me here. And I want to ask you, if you could have anything in this world, anything at all, what would it be? And he said, "Megan, I just want to go to school." And you know those defining moments in your life? You know those pivotal moments where you know that the answer that you give in that very second will determine the future forever, whether you go this way or this way in life. And you know that you can take the easy road or you can take the more challenging road. And that was one of the defining moments in my life. And I could have said what pretty much every other volunteer that he'd come in contact with has said to him. And I could have said, I'm so sorry, I'll pray for you, and leave it at that. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I could have then gone home, showed people a few photos of these kids, said what an amazing person I am for volunteering. Aren't they so happy with nothing because they're smiling in a photo, and leave it at that. But because the purpose that God had placed on my heart was so strong from such a young age, because I knew my why in life, I knew what it was that God wanted me to do. I didn't know how, but I knew the why. The answer was just shooting me in the face. So I looked down at him and I said to him, for as long as you need to go to school, I will make sure you go to school. And he looked up at me as if to say, yeah, whatever, just another white person that will come and go. And that's exactly what we did, my husband and I. We employed 2 teachers in the 2 months we were there. We started a homeschooling program. I wrote a curriculum because I'm a teacher that would get them going for about 3 months. We separated, there were 12 children. We separated them into different abilities. I tested them and worked my butt off in the time. We came back to Australia, registered a charity, and 7 years later, the school's still running, and we've managed to educate over 45 children in that time. And it's just been such a blessing in my life, and I go back there quite often. I think I've been back about 5 times since. And the purpose for me sharing this with you is because God can do amazing things in your life if you're willing to take that step out of faith. If you have justice at the heart of who you are. And my motivation isn't to build shame or guilt into your life. It's just to say that there's so much work to do, there's so much poverty in this world, there's so much heartache. Yet, as I said at the start, how many of us turn a blind eye to the very neighbour next door who's hurting? Or to things that are on TV where we can feel convicted of, but we don't do it out of fear. Maybe it's fear because you're a single parent, maybe you've got a family and you don't have the time or the energy. Maybe you're worried that if you give financially that you won't be able to look after yourself. But what I've come to realise is God doesn't have those limitations on you. When we got back from going from this trip, and we registered the charity, 2 years later I felt convicted that God was saying to my husband and I, you need to buy a school building. And we thought, well, how on earth are we going to do that? Because we were renting and it was just becoming really difficult over there in Zimbabwe to do that. And we prayed a lot about it, because we wanted to grow the school. We had visions and dreams about what we'd like to do. And so we really prayed, and this is actually the first time I've shared this story in public, and I'll explain to you the reasons why a bit later. But my husband and I felt convicted to donate a house deposit that we were saving for, over $30,000 towards this school building. And we had nothing else, like this was our life savings. And I was really scared, really scared, because it came at a really high personal cost. And we felt that this is what God wanted us to do. So that's exactly what we did. But we were still $40,000 short to get this house. We originally thought we had 3 months to raise $40,000, and I thought, we can do it. 3 months, you can do that. Then we found out, no, it's actually changed. We've only got 1 month to raise it. And that's when the panic started to kick in a bit. So we put the word out there on social media, we did a bit of a campaign, we ran a fundraising event, a trivia night, and the money started to come in. And I saw the thousands going up, $40,000, we're at $20,000, the halfway mark. And I started to stress because we'd already said, yes, we're going to buy this property. What if we don't have the money? No, I must have faith. You know, when your brain is kind of conflicted between your own world, the limitations of who God is and the power of who God is and stepping out in faith. There was that constant conflict. And then within 3 days before we needed the money in, we had the $40,000 come through and we had $800 extra. And I was just blown away. And we needed that $800, as it turned out. It was the exact amount that we needed, that we didn't account for in agent fees. And I just thought, wow, isn't this amazing? When you actually do something and don't just do lip service about justice, don't just talk about the issues, don't just post about them, but when you actually do something, whether it's through actions, through finances, through whatever it is, through showing somebody love, God does bless you back. And I'm not saying necessarily financially. What I'm saying is the blessings come in so many more ways than you can ever imagine. And I just want to really encourage you to, as a church, how much are you limiting God's power here in your own lives? How much are you limiting what He can do? Who here has felt God who placed a calling in your heart? It might be environmental, it might be for animals, it might be about people, it could be local, it could be international. But you've deliberately not stepped into it and done it out of either fear. It might be fear that what if I don't succeed? It might be fear of, well, I don't have the money. Or it might be fear of whatever it may be. But you haven't yet done it. I want to encourage you. That's what God has called us to do, not to change the world, but to fulfill the purpose He's placed on your heart. And as the video said, that when we look at people in the eyes, when we actually go to people and we break down those barriers and get to know them, it's not about them and us anymore. It's collective and it's about we. And people have asked me, how have you been passionate for so long? It's been 7 years. And I'll tell you, it's been hard. My sister can vouch for it. Sometimes I just want to give it all up, and I want what I see other people having. I want that trip to Europe. I don't want to go to Africa again. Sometimes it's really frustrating, and I don't want to do it. I want to live a really simple life here and just go about in my own Adventist little bubble. But God has called us for so much more than that. And I remember this one time when I was in India, and I went to the colony there, the leper colony, and there was a lady there who had, I don't know if many of you have seen the effects of leprosy in photos or been to a leper colony yourself, but her toes were all missing and she had a lot of dead skin that needed to be scraped off her feet. And I am no doctor and I'm no nurse, and I'm okay with that stuff, but I don't particularly enjoy it. I didn't go over there for that reason. But I went to this community and they said, can you help clean up these wounds? And I said, sure, that's fine. So I put on the gloves and I got out a scalpel, and as I'm there scraping away, and I'm kneeling down, and I'm scraping away all her dead skin, and my stomach's churning a little bit, and I'm thinking, oh, am I hurting you? And then I remember, no, she can't feel this. And I'm scraping it all away. I look up, and the community's all watching me. And I look around, and there's so many people in this community that could be doing what I'm doing right now. And I realised the whole reason why what I'm doing mattered so much wasn't because they needed me to actually do it, but it was because I was humbling myself and saying, we're one, we're equal. I was looking her in the eyes. We had a connection. It separated them from us. And sometimes the meaning behind the action we do is far greater than the action itself. And when we separate them and us, when we get on people's level, when we see them, we give them dignity, we give them respect, we show them love. And they're things that no money can buy, but us taking action can give. And when Jesus, it reminds me of the story, when Jesus is walking through the crowd, and that woman who'd been bleeding, I forget now for how long, I think, does anyone know how long exactly? Anyway, a very long time, years and years and years.
12 years.
12 years, yeah, thank you. When she reached out and touched him, so many people were touching Jesus at that time. He was walking through a big crowd. He could have kept walking because he knew, he felt that he'd healed her. So he knew that his power had already healed her. But he chose to stop. He chose to turn and acknowledge her presence because she had not had people acknowledge her. I can pretty much guarantee that she would have been considered very unclean and despised. But Jesus looked at her. He saw her when he healed her. How often do we not see people? We place them in these little boxes. They're this particular religion, they're this race, they're this sexual orientation, they're this socioeconomic status, they're this kind of person. And we choose not to break down those barriers and get to know our very neighbour that God has called us to know, which means we're not giving people dignity, compassion, love, and the justice that is at the heart and character of who God is. Imagine if we chose to extract holiness from God's character. If I said to you, no, God's not holy, how many pastors and people would say, how dare you say that? God is so holy. Yet we can extract justice from God's character and be completely happy with going about our everyday lives and not reflecting that element of his character. Because we're too concerned that it might be an issue or a political agenda, or it might be something else, and we're too scared to actually do something about it, when it's actually God's character in his heart that we're failing to reflect as a result of inaction. And I just want to share with you this amazing quote by Eugene Cho. He's a pastor that runs a Justice Conference, which is an interdenominational Christian conference that I attended 2 years ago. And he's incredible. And this quote says, "Why do I care much about justice? It's because I care much about the gospel. The whole gospel. The Great Commission, the Great Commandment. Because I care much about the scriptures. Because I care much about the words and actions of Jesus, my Lord and Saviour. Because I care about Jesus' walk to Golgotha and Jesus' walk through Samaria. Because I care much about people, including those who are often forgotten or pushed to the margins. Justice matters because it reflects the character of God, so let's be careful not to extract justice out of God's character and then call it an agenda, an elective, a tertiary issue, a political thing or whatever. Justice is part of our discipleship. Justice is part of our worship, the whole gospel. Isn't it time that we break the silence on issues that really matter to God? Isn't it time to ask God to really change our hearts to one that is aligned to his? Because together, we can actually bring a slice of the kingdom of heaven to this earth right now for people. We can watch it as it transforms lives, communities, hearts, and as people are then witnesses to the true character of who God is, because we're showing the true character of who God is. So thank you.